An iron bed sits empty in the ruined city of Rabbah, 13.5 feet long, 6 feet wide, and assume the Rephaim are just the monsters of the narrative. The brute muscle of the Canaanite world. They hoarded grain. They terrorized nations. Now, they cannot even lift a finger. Their voices are thin. Their breath is gone. You can almost feel the cold, suffocating claustrophobia of the pit. Isaiah paints a grotesque picture. The maggots are their bed. The worms are their blanket. They look at the Babylonian tyrant stepping into the dark. They speak a single, mocking question. Have you become as weak as we are? Have you become like us? This is the punchline of the Hebrew prophets. This is the theological takedown. Isaiah takes the terrifying pagan myth and guts it. The Rephaim are not healers. They are the ultimate picture of human impotence. They were the biggest men in the ancient world, and the grave swallowed them whole. They wore the heaviest scale armor, and it turned to rust in the dark. They demanded worship, and all they got was dust on their tongues. The Canaanites poured blood into the dirt because they wanted a savior they could measure. They wanted a healer who looked invincible. They put their hope in flesh, in muscle, in towering violence. They believed that if something was big enough, strong enough, ruthless enough, it could hold back the chaos of the world. God looks at this pagan obsession and exposes the lie. He lets the giants die. He lets them rot. He lets their massive bones turn to chalk in the valleys of Ammon and Moab, the physical obstacles standing between a wandering, exhausted nation and a promised land. And they do carry that weight in the text. He leaves their iron beds empty. The physical size of the Rephaim was not a marker of divine life. It was a monument to their own mortality. The true Rapha, the true cellular healing of a broken world, was never going to come from a giant swinging a spear. It was never going to come from human muscle. It was never going to be found in the men who use violence to hoard power. But that ancient idolatry did not stay buried. In Bronze Age Syria, the Canaanite temptation did not die with Og of Bashan. The Rephaim just changed their clothes. You do not live near the ruins of Bashan, and you have probably never seen an iron bed forged for a warlord, but you are surrounded by the exact same theology. When you wake up at 2 a.m. with a knot in your chest, feeling the crushing unpredictability of the world, what do you reach for? When you feel the fragility of your own body, or the sudden instability of your paycheck, or the unraveling of your culture, you naturally look for something massive to stand behind. You want a giant. You want something that looks invincible to heal the anxiety in your blood. We do not pour sheep's blood down clay pipes into the dirt. We pour our allegiance, our money. But if you look closer at the Hebrew root hiding inside their name, at the strange way the prophets talk about them, and our votes into modern giants, maybe for you, the giant is a political machine. You see a towering figure standing behind a podium, backlit by stadium lights and amplified by 1,000 cameras. And you believe their sheer volume can stitch a broken society back together. Maybe your giant is financial. You walk across the polished marble of an institutional lobby, or you stare at the cold blue light of a stock portfolio on your smartphone, and you tell yourself that if you just build a wall of wealth high enough, the chaos of the world cannot touch your family. We call these things our security, but they are just the Rephaim. This is not a survival strategy. It is a Canaanite liturgy. You are asking something made of dust to do the work of the divine. What does it actually feel like to trust a giant? It feels like relief. At first, you hand your agency over to a charismatic leader, a booming voice, a sprawling economic system, and for a moment, the world feels manageable. You feel the heavy scale armor of their promises wrapping around your own fragile shoulders. But the anxiety never actually leaves. Does it? It just mutates. Somewhere deep in your bones, you know, the giant is mortal when they finally die. At the ancient clay tablets buried deep in the Syrian dirt, you start to see something. You know, the institution is corruptible. You know, the wealth can evaporate in a single afternoon of bad news on a ticker tape. The Rephaim are not a cure for your fear. They are a symptom of it. You keep pouring your energy down the pipes, begging the powerful forces of this world to bring order to your life. And the silence that echoes back is deafening. The prophet Isaiah is speaking directly to you when he pictures those ghosts trembling in the dust. He is warning you about the inevitable endpoint of trusting in sheer human mass. The tragic irony of the Rephaim is that the bigger they are, the more completely they collapse. Institutions rout. Market graphs plummet. Political saviors step down from the stage. Their voices grow quiet. And they end up in the exact same dirt as Og of Bashan. If you tie your peace to a giant, you will eventually find yourself staring into an empty grave, listening to whispers in the dark, because the real Rapha, the cellular healing that your soul is actually desperate for, cannot come from a king who protects himself with iron and bronze. It comes from a king who lets his own flesh be torn. The monster reading completely misses. In the Hebrew mind, names are not labels. They are destinies. They carry the architecture of reality. A different kind of king falls into the dirt. The sky above Jerusalem turns black, suffocating and thick. The ground shakes. It does not tremble from the marching of a towering warlord, but from a single, exhausted breath. Blood dries dark against the splinters of a rough wooden beam. A massive stone rolls across a doorway, sealing the cold air inside a borrowed cave. The king descends into Sheol. He enters the same lightless pit where the ancient Rephaim whisper in the dust. He walks into the exact realm where the tyrants of the Bronze Age lie paralyzed, wrapped in worms, clutching their rusted crowns. But this king does not arrive in scale armor. He arrives wearing the open wounds of a Roman whip. He does not carry a spear shaft, thick as a weaver's beam. He carries hands freshly torn by iron spikes. The Rephaim demanded blood from the living. They required endless sacrifices poured down clay pipes just to maintain their phantom illusions in the dark. This king pours his own blood out in the blinding daylight so that the dead can finally breathe. The cross is not the defeat of a failed revolutionary. It is the obliteration of the Canaanite myth. And the name Rephaim contains a contradiction that has baffled translators for centuries. In one chapter, the word points to a towering warrior. For centuries, humanity believed that ultimate power looked like sheer physical mass. They believed the men who could crush bone held the secret to vitality. They called the monsters the healers, because they could not imagine a god who would heal a broken world through his own brokenness. They could only imagine salvation arriving with a sword. But the true Rapha is not found in invincibility. It is found in surrender. Isaiah saw the Rephaim trembling in the pit, terrified, weak, and hollow. When Christ descends into the grave, he does not tremble. He does not become a shivering ghost. He breathes in the suffocating dust, and the dust gives way. He reaches into the heart of the ancient prison, and he shatters the bronze gates from the inside out. The true healer does not need a 13-foot iron bed to prove his strength. He needs 3 days in the dark, and then he leaves the stone rolled away. He leaves the burial spices lingering in the Sunday morning air. He leaves the linen cloths folded neatly on the cold floor. Og of Bashan died, and his towering mythology crumbled into nothing. Jesus of Nazareth dies, and a new creation bursts out of the dirt. And what emerges from that empty tomb changes exactly how you will walk through the rest of your life. Who can crush a chariot with his bare hands? Turn the page, and the exact same word points to a whispering ghost. The Eastern kings marched across the desert with bronze swords, and their empires were eventually swallowed by the blowing sand. The Israelite spies stared at towering Canaanite warriors, and their own terror left an entire generation wandering in the wilderness. King Og of Bashan slept in a massive iron bed, and a ragged army of former slaves left his body bleeding in the dirt. The pagan priests poured blood down clay pipes, and the underground silence remained completely unbroken. The Babylonian tyrant descended into Sheol, and the ghostly shadows mocked his arrival in the dark. We pour our allegiance into modern political and financial monoliths, and we find ourselves just as terrified of tomorrow. A different kind of king allowed his own flesh to be torn, and the true healing of the world burst out of a borrowed tomb. Same word, same desperate human heart. One true healer. But maybe the part that stays with me most is that iron bed in the ruined city of Rabbah. Not the battlefield records, not the size of the spear shafts, just that massive, empty piece of furniture left behind in the dirt. An entire ancient culture believed that whoever slept in it held the secret to immortality. They looked at sheer physical mass and called it divine. And yet, a shadowy phantom trapped in the dust of the underworld. Turn another page, and the root of that very same word. It is just cold metal, sitting in the ruins of a forgotten era, unable to add a single heartbeat to the life of the man who built it. If you are in a season where the chaos of the world feels entirely overwhelming, you might feel the temptation to look for a giant. If you find yourself desperately hoping that a politician, a growing bank account, or a flawless institution will finally stitch your fractured piece back together, you are doing exactly what the Canaanites did in the dark. You are asking something made of dust to heal your soul. The true Rapha is not a promise of an invincible champion. It is the presence of a crucified king. And may the God who refused to conquer the world with an iron sword meet you in your moments of deepest fragility and become the profound cellular healer you could never find in the shadows of the Rephaim. Is used to describe the tender, life-giving touch of God himself. A giant, a ghost, a healer. How do those three concepts share the same linguistic DNA? The answer changes how you read the ancient world. And it exposes an obsession, forged from cold black metal. It was built to hold a man whose shadow would swallow a normal warrior whole, that still drives human beings today. We are a species terrified of our own fragility, always looking for something invincible to stand behind. The Rephaim are not just the giants who block the way. They are the false healers who promise immortality. To feel the weight of this word, you have to realize that the biblical writers are doing something devastating with their vocabulary. They are taking a title that ancient kings used to claim ultimate power over life and death, and they are turning it into a profound mockery. This is not a piece of ancient trivia. It is a diagnosis of what we build, who we trust, and what we run to when the world feels out of control. The place to start is the dirt, where these titans first bleed. Because when a giant falls in the Bronze Age, his name does something impossible. The pages of the Torah are littered with their massive bones. Genesis chapter 14 opens with an invasion. A coalition of Mesopotamian kings sweeps across the desert. They carry bronze swords and composite bows. They march down the king's highway. And their first targets are not the wealthy cities of the plains. Their first targets are the Rephaim, the giants in Ashtaroth Karnaim. You can hear the clash of bronze echoing off the limestone cliffs. The man who slept in it is dead. His name was Og, the king of Bashan, and he was the last of a bloodline. You can smell the smoke of burning grain in the valleys. The eastern kings want to secure the trade routes. To do that, they have to break the local muscle. Centuries later, Moses stands on the edge of the Jordan River. He looks back at a scorched trail of conquest. He recounts the territories they have crossed to a new generation, and his ledger reads like a graveyard of monsters. The Emim lived in Moab, a people great and many, tall as the Anakim. The Zamzummim lived in Ammon, a people great and many, tall as the Anakim. The Rephaim lived in Bashan, a people great and many, tall as the Anakim. Same phrasing again and again. Same terrifying scale. When the Israelite spies scout the land of Canaan, they do not just see fortified walls. They see descendants of these towering warlords. They see men whose sheer physical volume makes the spies feel like insects waiting to be crushed under a heavy boot. The report they bring back is contagious panic. The camp erupts in weeping. The people refuse to march. They are not just intimidated, they are paralyzed. This was the Bronze Age reality. Size was survival. In a world without mechanized warfare, without gunpowder, that terrified the ancient Near East for centuries. You can almost smell the crushed basalt and the dried blood. A man who stands 3 feet taller and carries 50 extra pounds of muscle is a walking siege engine. He swings a spear shaft as thick as a weaver's beam. He wears scale armor that weighs as much as a grown man. He steps onto a battlefield and the ground literally vibrates. He does not just win fights. He shatters morale before the lines even clash. These towering men became the elite warrior class of Canaan. They became the kings. They became the untouchable aristocrats who hoarded the grain, demanded the tribute, and slept in iron beds. They were not just men. They were mythologies walking around on 2 legs. The people of the ancient Near East did not just fear the Rephaim. They revered them. They believed these massive warlords possessed a vitality, a life force, that normal humans simply did not possess. If you were that big, that strong, that unkillable in battle, the ancients believed you were close to the gods. You held the secret to endurance. You were the closest thing to a mortal. But then, the giants die. A smooth stone from a shepherd's sling sinks into a forehead. A bronze spear pierces a massive lung. An army of runaway slaves sweeps through Bashan. And suddenly, the unkillable warlords are bleeding into the dirt, just like everyone else, on the plains of Edrei, the exact spot where this titan finally fell to a ragtag army of former brickmakers and runaway slaves. The myth cracks open. The towering kings stop breathing, and their bodies grow cold. And when they do, the Hebrew text does something brilliant. It follows them down into the dirt. Because to understand why the Rephaim mattered, you have to look at what they become in the dark. A massive body is lowered into the dirt. The heavy bronze armor is stripped away. The ground swallows the giant, and the biblical text gives him a new, terrifying existence in the dark. Picture the prophet Isaiah looking down into the pit of Sheol. It is the ancient underworld, a lightless realm of dry dust, where the dead wait in total silence. Isaiah is not describing men holding swords. He is describing thin, vaporous shadows who cannot even raise their voices above a whisper. In Isaiah chapter 26, verse 14, he writes about the wicked kings who once oppressed God's people. He says, "They are dead. They will not live. They are ghosts. They will not rise." The word your English Bible translates as ghosts or deceased in that verse is the Hebrew Rephaim. It is the exact same noun used for Og of Bashan. It is the exact same title given to the towering warlords who made the earth shake. But the etymology of this word holds a massive contradiction that has puzzled translators for centuries. The noun is built directly from the Hebrew root verb rapha. They called his kind the Rephaim. It is a name that haunts the edges of the Old Testament. Genesis mentions them, and rapha means to heal, to restore, to take a torn, broken thing and stitch it back together into wholeness. You can feel the physical weight of this root 3 books earlier in the Torah. The Israelite camp stands in the scorching desert of Shur. Their throats are swollen with thirst, but the water at the oasis of Marah is toxic and bitter on their tongues. Moses throws a piece of wood into the pool, and the water suddenly turns sweet. In that moment of physical salvation, God delivers a defining revelation of his own character. He says, "I am the Lord who heals you." The Hebrew phrase is Yahweh Ropheka. The active root is Rapha. The healing here is not a metaphor. It is cellular. It is the literal preservation of life in a wasteland. So we are left with a paradox. How does a word that means divine, life-giving restoration, become the name for a brutal Bronze Age giant, and then the name for a weak, shivering phantom trapped in a grave? It feels like a linguistic accident. It feels like the biblical authors simply ran out of vocabulary and recycled a word. But Hebrew does not do accidents. Being slaughtered in the valley of Ashtaroth, Deuteronomy tracks their massive footprint across the hill country of Seir. The shared name is not a coincidence. It is a profound, devastating mockery. The biblical prophets are taking a title that the pagan world worshipped, and they are turning it inside out to expose a lie. To understand the joke they are making, you have to leave Israel for a moment. You have to travel north, dig up a Canaanite clay tablet, and see what the ancient world was desperately trying to summon in the dark. In 1928, a Syrian farmer is walking behind his plow when the iron blade suddenly scrapes against hard limestone. He uncovers a sealed tomb, and within months, archaeologists are digging through the ruins of an ancient Canaanite city called Ugarit. Deep in the dirt, they find a library of baked clay tablets covered in tiny, wedge-shaped cuneiform script. These texts date back to the late Bronze Age. Centuries before, Israel had a king, and they contain the liturgical poetry of the Canaanite religion. And right there, etched into the baked clay, is the word RPUM. It is the Ugaritic equivalent of Rephaim, but the tablets do not describe massive giants fighting on a battlefield. They describe a ritual for the dead. Joshua clears them from the forested mountains. They are the giants, the warlords, the towering anomalies whose sheer physical mass. The texts reveal that the ancient Canaanites practiced a desperate ancestor cult. When their massive, tyrannical warrior kings died, the people believed those giants descended into the underworld and became divine beings. They believed the kings retained their immense vitality, their superhuman life force, even in the dark. And so, the living would go to the tombs. They would slaughter animals and pour blood and wine down through narrow clay pipes into the burial chambers. They would chant incantations, summoning the dead kings up from the dust, begging them to bring fertility to the crops, strength to the armies, and healing to the sick. The Canaanites literally called their dead giants the healers. They were terrified of the world's fragility, the drought, the disease, the famine. So they projected ultimate power onto the largest, most brutal men they had ever seen. They believed the sheer physical mass of these warlords meant they possessed a divine energy that could stitch a broken world back together. The name was not a biological reality. It was a desperate pagan prayer. So, the Canaanite priests pour their blood into the trench. They wait in the dark for the phantom kings to rise and heal their land. But the biblical authors look at this pagan theology, and they do not just reject it. They turn it into a cosmic joke. When you read the Old Testament prophets, made the Israelite spies stare at their own hands and see themselves as grasshoppers. Most people read the Old Testament. They use the Canaanites' own sacred title, but they strip it of all its power. They take the word Rephaim and completely invert the meaning. The giants were not divine healers. They were rotting corpses in the dirt. The biblical writers are engaging in fierce theological mockery. You call your dead warlords the healers? You think Og of Bashan can answer your prayers from the grave? God's prophets look down into Sheol, and they see exactly what the giants have become. And what Isaiah sees is a picture of total, pathetic weakness. Picture the descent in Isaiah chapter 14. The king of Babylon falls. The ultimate tyrant dies. His body hits the dirt. He descends into Sheol. The underworld wakes up to meet him. The dry dust stirs. The shadows shift. And who is waiting in the dark? The Rephaim. Isaiah uses the exact Canaanite word, but look at what they are doing. They do not stand tall. They do not swing bronze swords. They do not bring healing or fertility or life. They tremble. They whisper. They stare in absolute shock. The text says, Sheol is stirred up to meet the king. It wakes the spirits of the dead. The Hebrew explicitly calls them the Rephaim, the ancient warlords, the towering kings of Canaan, the giant elite who used to make the earth shake with their footsteps. They crushed chariots,